Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Howard Horror. Today, we're going to be looking at a story in which the victim was extremely lucky to survive, but also unlucky to have it happen in the first place. And stick around to see the horrific photo that is associated with this story, and let's get into it. On August 15th, 2003, 41-year-old veteran construction worker Ron Hunt was part of a crew that was building this house in Rio, Nevada. On that particular day, Ron knew the first thing he had to do upon arrival to the job site was drill these large holes in the wood ceiling in one of the rooms of the house. So, first thing he does when he gets to the job site is grab this 6-foot ladder from the back of his truck and this large drill, and he set off into that particular room. Once inside, he opened up a step ladder and placed it where he wanted it, and then squeezed the trigger of his drill a couple times to test it. Once he knew that it worked, he climbed the ladder a couple of steps, not to the top, but just about 1 or 2 steps up, and he began punching holes into the ceiling one by one with his drill. At first, the holes were very easy to punch through, but when he got down and moved the ladder to another section of the room where he needed more holes in the ceiling, he got up there and started drilling, but he just could not get the drill to go through. He didn't really understand why, because he knew there was nothing on the other side from where he was drilling that could really stop the drill from going through, so it really should be working. So he decides he just needs some more leverage. He needed to really push on the back of the drill while he's pulling the trigger, so instead of standing on the second or third run of the 6-foot ladder, he climbed to the very top of it, the part you aren't supposed to stand on any ladder, and there he thought he could have enough leverage to finally push the drill through the ceiling. So then, at the top of the ladder, he lines up his drill where he wants it, and then he pulls the trigger, and at the same time, he pushes with all of that extra leverage into the ceiling, and as he does, he starts to feel the drill start to go into the wood, but at the same time, he doesn't realize that he's pushing so hard on the drill, he's also pushing himself downwards at an angle, and at some point, he pushes too hard. Then he causes the ladder to literally shoot out from underneath him. Ron instinctively tries to throw the drill away from his body as he fell, but he wasn't able to throw the drill far enough away from him. And even worse, the drill, when it landed basically underneath him, it landed on its back with the drill bit pointing straight up. So when Ron landed face first, his right eye socket landed directly on the drill. So this 18-inch long and 1.5-inch in diameter drill impales his eye through the eyeball, through the head, and it goes straight out the back of his head. Ron, when he hits the ground, being impaled, he somehow is still conscious, and without even rolling over, he reaches up with his hands, and he feels the base of the drill, and he traces it with his hands up the drill bit, and he feels it leading upwards into his eye, and then he feels around the back of his head, and he feels the rest of the drill coming out of his skull, and at that point, he just starts screaming. The only other man on the job site at the time was a man named Forrest. He was in a separate part of the job site, and he hears Ron screaming, so he runs over, and he goes in the room, and he sees Ron, who's now standing up, cradling the drill. The 18-inch drill bit is still poking through his head, and so Ron is looking at Forrest, and then he slowly turns his body to show him that he's been fully impaled through the head, front and back. And Forrest is horrified at what he's seeing. He can't even believe Ron is still alive. But then Forrest jumps into action. He rips a piece of his shirt off and he runs over to Ron and kind of wraps it around his head to control the bleeding. And he tells Ron to stay put, and Forrest runs out of the job site and just guns it about 1,000 feet away to the nearest house, and he was able to use their phone to call for paramedics. The paramedics arrive in an ambulance a few minutes later, and they find Ron sitting next to Forrest, holding his drill still in his face. And Ron is very obviously in shock because he's not making any sound, he's totally calm and conscious, and he's just there looking out into the distance. So the paramedics go over and they detach the drill base from the drill bit. So all that's left is the actual 18-inch drill bit that's all that's left in his head. They take Ron via ambulance to a local hospital, and from there they actually fly him in a helicopter to a bigger hospital that can handle this sort of injury. So when he arrives at this hospital, they rush him immediately to the operating room, and at first the surgeons attempted to cut off either end of the rod sticking through his eye and the part sticking through his head, but then they realized that this would leave a huge metal piece still stuck in his head, and they ruled that out almost instantly. And then they realized the only way they were getting this out was to slowly unscrew it from his head. So they gave him some morphine, and then, over the next couple of hours, the doctors slowly twisted this piece of metal until it finally unwound itself out of his skull. And apparently, as they were doing this, Ron, who was so high on painkillers, was cracking jokes, saying things like, "Somebody needs to come take a picture of me. I probably look so great." And miraculously, Ron would survive. He would not be paralyzed or have any long lasting effects. The worst thing being that he just lost the sight of his right eye. And all things considered, Ron is pretty okay with that. The surgeons would tell Ron that the only reason that he did not die or get paralyzed was because when the drill bit went into his skull, it kind of pressed his brain to the side as it went through. Had it punctured his brain when it went through, it almost certainly would have killed him. But by some incredible slim chance, it did not, and he survived. And here is the x-ray taken of Ron with the drill bit in his skull. Alright everybody, I hope you enjoyed this one. If you like this kind of content, be sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you be notified when new videos go up, as we post every other day. And this has been Howard Horror, and as usual, have a great day.